The first thing everyone noticed about the woman in the ivory suit was not her beauty. It was her stillness. In a room where power made men loud, careless, and eager to be seen, she sat like silence had taken human form, back straight, chin lifted, one gloved hand resting lightly on the stem of a crystal glass she had not touched. And when Elva vilely entered the room, every person in the hall rose. Every person except her. The string quartet stumbled half a note. The mayor's wife turned pale. A senator nearly dropped his champagne. Because this was not merely a wealthy man entering a gala. This was Elva Viley, the invisible hand beneath the city's gold-plated skin, the man judges never named, police chiefs never challenged, and billionaires called sir when nobody was recording. He did not walk with bodyguards. He walked with consequences. People lowered their eyes as he passed, offering quiet greetings, nervous smiles, little bows disguised as polite nods. But the woman in ivory did not rise, did not smile, did not greet him. She simply looked at him as though he were a late guest at a dinner she had not wanted to attend. A hush swept the black-tie charity hall like someone had opened a freezer door. Elva stopped. For one heartbeat, then two, then three, the room forgot how to breathe. He turned toward her table. His shoes made no sound against the marble floor, but somehow each step landed inside everyone's chest. At the table beside hers, a shipping magnate slowly removed his hand from his wife's wrist. Across the room, a violinist lowered her bow. Near the stage, one of Elva's lieutenants, a scar-faced man named Severin, shifted his jacket slightly, as if preparing for the kind of mess that usually followed public disrespect. Elva reached her table. She remained seated. Their eyes met. "Everyone else," he said softly, "seems to know who I am." His voice was calm, worse than calm. It was the kind of voice that had buried men without ever rising above conversation. The woman tilted her head. "I know exactly who you are." That made it worse. People leaned in without meaning to. Elva studied her face, not a flicker of fear, not even contempt, just a cool, almost surgical certainty. "And still," he said, "you chose not to greet me." "Yes." The answer fell cleanly between them. A few people looked away, unable to bear what came next. Because everyone knew stories. A hedge fund manager who had laughed too long at a private joke and lost every contract he held within a month. A nightclub owner who had kept Elva waiting once and was later found bankrupt, vanished, and very thoroughly forgotten. A prosecutor who had dared call him a parasite in a sealed chamber and then withdrew from public life after her brother's accident. Nobody insulted Elva vilely in public. Nobody did it twice. Yet the woman in ivory sat before him like a queen, receiving an overpraised visitor. "What is your name?" Elva asked. She took her time before answering. "Aiden." Not Edith, not Alina, not anything familiar enough to soften the air. Just Aiden. A name like a locked door. "And what," Elva asked, "made you think this was a wise decision, Aiden?" She finally lifted her glass, though she did not drink. She only turned it once, watching the chandelier light move through the crystal. Then she said, "Because men like you are always greeted first. Stared at, feared, admired, accommodated. I was curious what would happen if, for once in your life, you were simply treated like any other man entering a room." A woman near the orchestra covered her mouth. Someone at the back muttered a prayer. Severin took a half-step forward. Elva raised one finger. Severin stopped. Then something happened no one in that room had ever seen before. Elva smiled. Not the smile he used in photographs, the polished one that said he funded hospitals and sponsored museums. This was smaller, sharper, realer. As if for the first time that evening, He had become interested. "You are either very brave," he said, "or very tired of living." Aiden met his gaze. "Neither. I simply dislike rituals built on fear." It was such a reckless sentence that several guests looked at the exits. Elva pulled out the chair opposite her and sat. A sound rippled through the room, not loud but collective. Shock has a texture, and that was it. The Mafia boss had taken a seat. Not to interrogate, not to threaten, to remain. The gala resumed around them in fragile pieces. Music returned, too thin. Waiters moved again, pretending not to stare. Conversations restarted, but every ear in the hall stayed tuned to table 9. Elvar folded his hands. "You came to a foundation gala hosted by my family's trust," he said. "You ignored me publicly. You speak to me as if there are no consequences. So let us skip the theater. Why are you here?" Aiden looked toward the stage, where a banner shimmered above the charity's emblem. The VILLI Foundation for Children's Advancement. The gold letters glittered under the lights. "I came," she said, "because I wanted to see how comfortably a lie can dress." His eyes narrowed, though his expression never changed. "That is a dangerous accusation. Only if it's false." For the first time, Severin moved without waiting. He circled behind Elvar and leaned down slightly. "Say the word," he murmured. Elvar ignored him. Aiden reached into the small silk clutch at her side. Every muscle in the surrounding room tensed. Even Elvar shifted, slightly, precisely. But all she removed was a folded ivory card. She placed it on the table between them. "Read the back." Elvar turned it over. For the first time all night, his face changed. Not much, but enough. A tiny stillness entered him, the sort that appears when a man expecting a match suddenly finds a blade. On the back of the card were 12 handwritten dates, each followed by a child's initials. And beside each initial, a sum of money. Elvar said nothing. Aiden leaned forward slightly. The amounts are identical to the monthly transfers routed from Shell education funds in Bellicote, Varros, and St. Arden. Transfers that were supposed to finance scholarships. Instead, they disappeared. 12 children vanished from the program, records the same weeks the money did. Severin's face lost color. At the neighboring tables, people could not hear every word now, but they could smell danger-growing teeth. Elvar placed the card down very carefully. "Who are you?" he asked. A question asked too late is usually an expensive one. "You are not press." "No, not police." She gave the faintest hint of amusement. "If I were police, you wouldn't be sitting." That answer unsettled him more than accusation had. The room watched a predator realize the dark in front of him might have eyes. Elvar glanced at the stage, where his younger sister, Maya Viley, was laughing with donors, unaware, or pretending to be, that all gravity in the room had shifted. Then he looked back at Aiden. "What do you want?" "Not money." "Everyone wants money. Only people who understand nothing say that." His smile returned, but it was thinner now. "Then perhaps you want revenge." That finally made her expression move. "Not much. Just enough for him to see he had touched a wire." "Perhaps," she said. He studied her more closely now, the measured posture, the old-fashioned gloves, the lack of nerves. There was something about her face, not familiarity exactly, more like memory standing behind frosted glass. "Elvar." A new voice interrupted them. Maya had arrived. She was luminous, poised, wrapped in silver that made the room rearrange itself around her. Unlike her brother, she carried power like a performance, warm when watched, cold when tested. But when she saw the card on the table, her smile faltered. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Aiden turned to her. For the first time that night, emotion entered her voice, not anger, but something older and steadier. Yes, she said, there has been one for 19 years. Maya stared. Elvar did not move. The music stopped again. Do I know you? Maya asked. Aiden slowly removed one glove. On the inside of her wrist was a crescent-shaped burn scar. Maya staggered backward as if struck. No, she whispered. Now the room had no sound at all. Elvar's gaze snapped from the scar to his sister's face. Maya's lips trembled. No, she said again, softer now, that's not possible. Aiden rose at last, and somehow that was more commanding than if she had stood earlier. You should know it, she said to Maya. You gave it to me. A gasp tore through the nearest cluster of guests. Severin took a step back. Elvar stood slowly. What is she talking about? He asked. Maya did not answer. She was staring at Aiden as though the dead had walked in wearing couture. When I was 6, Aiden said, I lived in the lower house on Cinder Vale. I slept beside a cracked window and thought rich people smelled like lilies because the first rich child I ever met wore perfume and gloves. She held up her bare hand. You were 10. You came with your governess to deliver winter parcels for the cameras, your family's charity event. Maya's breath caught hard. Aiden continued, her voice almost tender now, which made it more brutal. You were bored. The adults were talking. You found me in the kitchen and asked if poor children felt pain the same way wealthy ones did. No, Maya whispered. You heated a spoon over the stove and pressed it into my wrist to test your theory. The mayor's wife let out a broken sound. Several people backed away from Maya instinctively. It was an accident, Maya said suddenly, too quickly. I was a child. Aiden's gaze never left her. You told the staff I slipped. You cried beautifully, even then. Elvar looked at his sister. For the first time in anyone's memory, Maya vilely looked small. You knew? Aiden asked him. Elvar said nothing, and that silence was answer enough. Maya turned to her brother wildly. I was 10. You remembered, Aiden said. That's the difference. I would have accepted cruelty from a child, but years later, when your foundation absorbed the girls' home where I studied, you saw my file. You saw the scar photo attached to my medical records, and you had me removed from the scholarship list. The entire room seemed to tilt. Maya's eyes filled, not with remorse but with panic. Elvar's voice dropped. Is that true? Maya said, she's twisting. Is it true? Maya looked around the room, searching for an ally and finding only witnesses. Finally, she said, I protected us. Us. That one word changed everything. Not me, us. Elvar turned back to Aiden, the missing funds. Aiden nodded once. 12 girls, all bright, all poor, all with records that could embarrass people if they ever rose high enough to speak clearly. Some had injuries, some had testimonies, some had memories attached to wealthy families who treated charity like laundering for the soul. The card on the table no longer looked like paper. It looked like a fuse. And where are these girls now? Elvar asked. In rooms paid for by another name, Aiden said. Moved quietly, educated cheaply, kept invisible, not dead, worse, erased. Several donors stood up at once, horrified. Phones began disappearing into jackets as people debated whether to record, call, flee, or pretend none of this was happening. Severin leaned toward Elvar. We need to leave. But Elvar remained fixed on Aiden. You should have brought this to me privately. At that, she laughed. It was not loud, but it was devastating. Privately, she said, so the Violets could decide what truth was worth, so your lawyers could bury it under stained glass and sympathy dinners. Her eyes hardened. No, men like you rely on private. The words landed like hammer blows. Public, she said, is the one room your kind cannot fully control. Maya moved first. Not toward escape. Toward Aiden. Fast enough to surprise everyone. She snatched the card from the table and tore it once, straight through the center. Severin cursed. But Aiden did not react. In fact, she smiled. A terrible, elegant smile. And that was when the screens descended. Every year, the Viley Gala featured a donor presentation before the auction. Massive hidden panels unfurled from the ceiling now, whirring down over the ballroom. At first, guests thought it was some awful technical mistake. Then the first video appeared. Security footage. Date stamp, 19 years ago. A grainy kitchen, a rich little girl in a winter coat, a smaller child backed against a stove. A spoon, a scream. The room exploded. Maya dropped the torn card. No, she whispered, spinning around. No, no, no. Then the second video played. A financial ledger. The third, internal foundation emails. The fourth, transport records under false names. The fifth, audio. Maya's own voice, older now, colder. Remove her from the shortlist, scar on left wrist, I don't want that face near a podium. Someone shouted for the police. Someone else began sobbing. And through all of it, Elva Viley stood still, looking not enraged, but betrayed. He turned slowly to Aiden. You came prepared. She slipped her glove back on. I came finished. Outside, sirens began in the distance. But the final twist had not yet arrived. Because Elvar did something no one expected. He stepped away from his sister. Then another step. Then he faced the room, lifted a microphone from the abandoned podium, and said, in a voice that sliced through panic like glass through silk, "Nobody leaves." The command was instinctive, terrifying. Half the room froze. But then he added, "Until every file in our Foundation archive is brought downstairs, every device surrendered, every locked office opened." Severin stared at him, Elvar. No, it was not a request. The old machinery of fear moved automatically. Men in dark suits scattered, not to silence the room, but to unlock doors. Maya grabbed Elvar's arm. Have you lost your mind? He removed her hand from his sleeve as if it were contamination. You stole from children under our mother's name. I protected this family. You protected yourself. His voice was low, lethal, and entirely stripped of affection. You made me host your rot. That was when the room understood something they had never considered. Elvar Viley had known many sins, but not this one, or not all of it. And for a man like him, betrayal was not softened by blood. Maya saw it too. For the first time, genuine fear took hold. She backed away. Elvar, she said, trembling now, listen to me. We can contain this. He looked at her with something far colder than anger. That is exactly what she came to prevent. Aiden watched in silence. Sirens grew louder. Guests were already sending messages, making calls, leaking fragments to the outside world. The scandal had escaped the building. It was in the streets now, in the cloud, in 1,000 hands. But Aiden was not done. Elvar, she said. He turned. There's one more thing. Something in her tone made even the panicked room pause. She reached into her clutch again. This time she removed a slim black remote. Not for the screens, for the chandelier. A tiny red light blinked on. Severin lunged. Too late. The chandelier did not explode. It descended. Slowly. Mechanically. 6 feet 5'4". Until it hovered just above the ballroom floor, revealing that its central column was not made of crystal at all, but reinforced steel built around a concealed cylindrical vault. A murmur spread, stunned and confused. Aiden pressed her thumb to the remote. The vault door clicked open. Inside were 12 sealed folders, each marked with initials, each tied with red thread. And on top of them all lay a silver spoon. The same spoon, blackened by age. The room seemed to split open. Maya made a sound no language owned. Elvar stared at the vault, then at Aiden. "How? You built your empire on hidden rooms," she said quietly. "I thought it only polite to learn architecture." He stepped closer to the vault, as if pulled. Inside the folders were birth certificates, transfer records, doctor reports, scholarship assessments, photos, audio transcripts, affidavits, every scrap of truth Maya had buried. Physical copies, impossible to erase with one good lawyer and a fire. "I spent 11 years finding them," Aiden said, "and 1 year deciding how you should see them." Elvar looked at the spoon for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was altered. Not softened, hollowed. "Who are you, really?" At last, she answered fully. "My name is Aiden Vale Arsery." Nothing happened for half a second. Then everything did. Severin's head snapped up. Elvar's face emptied. Even Maya forgot to cry. Because Arsery was not just a name. It was the name. The family that had gone to war with the Vileys 22 years earlier. The family everyone believed had been exterminated in a yacht fire off the coast of Vera. Children included. Except, apparently, not all of them. Elvar's voice was almost inaudible. "That's impossible." "My father was Soren Arsery," she said. "My mother was Lilette Vale. Your father had them killed, or believed he did." Severin crossed himself. One of the senators stumbled into a chair. The city had lived for 2 decades under the assumption that one dynasty had swallowed another. Entire criminal markets, political loyalties, and blood oaths had been built on that ending. And here stood a survivor in ivory gloves and perfect posture, not with a gun, but with documents. Maya began to laugh. It was a cracked, desperate laugh. "Oh, that's rich," she said. "All this grand moral spectacle, you're not here for the girls, you're here for vengeance." Aiden turned to her. "For years," she said, "I thought vengeance would be enough." Her eyes flicked briefly to the 12 folders. "Then I met the others. The girls. The erased ones. That changed the math." Police pounded at the front doors now. Security no longer knew whom to obey. Some ran to open them. Others stood frozen between old instincts and new reality. Elvar looked at Aiden with a complexity no one in that room could have translated. "Enemy witness, Judge Ghost. You could have killed us," he said. "Yes. Why didn't you?" And here, finally, came the ending no one expected. Aiden stepped toward the microphone, toward the cameras, toward the entire room of trembling wealth. And she said, "Because dead monsters become legends, living ones become testimony." A silence followed so complete it felt sacred. Then the doors burst open. Police flooded in. Not the kind Elvar owned. Federal. Financial crimes, trafficking, organized corruption. The kind summoned only when too much evidence is already in too many places. Maya tried to run. A woman in navy intercepted her before she reached the side corridor and snapped cuffs around her wrists. Severin reached inside his jacket, thought better of it, and raised both hands. Guests shouted, cameras flashed, donors cried. Some attempted to slip away only to be stopped and redirected toward identification points. And Elvar. He did not run. He stood beside the open vault, staring at the silver spoon. An agent approached him carefully. Elvar Viley you are being detained pending." "I know what pending means." His tone was flat. He extended his hands. The room nearly broke again at the sight. The untouchable man offering his wrists. But as the cuffs clicked shut, he looked not at the police, not at his sister, not at the cameras. "At Aiden. You planned every inch of this." "Yes. And if I had ordered you killed the moment I walked in." She held his gaze. "You didn't." He almost smiled. "Almost." "No," he said, "I suppose I didn't." He was led away through the grand doors beneath 100 stunned eyes. Maya followed screaming. Severin bowed his head as if entering church for the first time in his life. Within minutes, the vilely gala ceased to be a gala. It became evidence. But the true ending came 3 months later. And it was stranger than scandal. The city expected Aiden Arsery to seize the ruins, to reclaim her father's old empire, to step into the vacuum, to become the elegant new sovereign of the underworld. Instead, she vanished. No interviews, no memoir, no revenge tour, no shadow throne. Only one final public act. On the exact site of the burned girls' residence on Cinder Vale, where the scholarship fraud had begun and 12 lives had nearly been erased, a new building opened. Not a monument, not a charity, a school. Free, anonymous, heavily endowed through assets quietly liquidated from shell trusts the Violets had once hidden. Above the entrance, there was no founder's portrait. No gold plaque. Only a single inscription carved into black stone. No child should need evidence to prove they mattered. As for Elvar Violey, rumors multiplied from prison walls like ivy. Some said he was preparing appeals. Some said he had turned over names that would collapse half the city. Some said he spent his days writing letters no one answered. Only one was ever confirmed. Every month, without fail, a sealed envelope left his prison block addressed to the school on Cinder Vale. Every month, it was returned unopened. No one knew what the letters said. Until the final one. A winter storm knocked out power across half the city, delaying the mail and forcing the school's elderly groundskeeper, who could not read very well and cared even less for rules, to carry the envelope inside instead of sending it back. He set it on the headmistress's desk. She called Aiden. For the first time in 3 months, she returned. She stood in the empty office at dusk, with snow beginning to silver the windows, looking at the letter as though it belonged to someone buried. Then she opened it. Inside was no confession, no plea, no threat, just a single official document. A signed transfer of every remaining legal asset still held under Elvar Violey's personal name. All of it. To the school. Attached was one handwritten line. "You refused to greet me." It was the first honest thing anyone had done in my presence for 20 years. No signature. None was needed. The headmistress looked at Aiden carefully. "Will you accept it?" Aiden folded the note once, then twice. Outside, children's laughter drifted faintly up from the lower corridor. She walked to the fireplace, held the handwritten line above the flame, and let it burn. But the transfer document she placed on the desk. "Yes," she said. "Not for him. For them." And that was how the most feared man in the city built his final legacy, through the one woman who had denied him the ceremony fear usually demands. Not by love, not by forgiveness, but by being seen clearly. And refused. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, click the subscribe button and don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment.